It's shocking what Chris Murphy gets away with, because as DHS Senate Subcommittee Chair, he covered up the largest mass shooting in American history. And here it is.
Anymore. I'm glad you're getting a paycheck, and I'm glad you're sitting in your seats thinking you'll never be removed because you got election fraud on your side, but we're working on that too. Have a great day.
Thank you. Please do not clap.
Lindsey Graham, you are a traitor to the country. You know it was rigged. You know it was rigged.
Lindsey Graham is a traitor.
Why aren't you fighting for the rights of Nevada? My free speech. I couldn't go to church. Where were you? You were not by my side fighting it. You were making millions in your 14 houses, 2 private jets, inside of stock trading to the tune of $3 million.
Nevada's got a lot of problems, folks.
But the most corrupt cover-up to ever occur in Nevada still haunts Las Vegas to this day. On October 1st, 2017, one of the largest mass shootings in America occurred at the Route 91 Harvest Festival in Las Vegas. It was a terroristic assault on innocent civilians and everything American I can think of. But if you think we don't have an answer to this tragedy because the guy responsible killed himself and nothing ever pointed to anything else, then I'll let you in on a secret everyone else here already knows.
The word incompetence has been brought forward, and I am absolutely offended with that characterization.
It's so poorly done.
It's so poorly done, I have a hard time thinking it's just negligence.
The entire thing was one big cover-up. And they got away with it because the mainstream media dropped the story almost immediately, and officials stopped giving press conferences to avoid having to answer any of the public's questions about any of the glaring inconsistencies, conflicting witness statements, or explain any of the other shootings that occurred on the Strip that night that went against the FBI's lone gunman narrative that for whatever reason they were set on from the very beginning, despite all the obvious evidence to the contrary.
Not one guy did not do all this. There is no way.
Holy shit!
This motherfucker's still ringing out right now.
What is that?
Okay, hey, let's go. That's close. That's real close.
And then I moved. Oh, thanks.
Our SWAT took down one suspect on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay.
They did. Yeah. That's high power though. They're all the rounds I did were all headshots, bro.
But we know. And we have multiple different calibers, so I'm just saying we have at least one suspect down. There's most likely more than one. Yeah, that's fucking dead center.
Fucking center, dude.
Alright, yeah.
Shit. That guy, see, same thing. That guy was a fucking headshot right in the fucking forehead.
Fuck, man.
There can't be that many headshots with that amount of people over here. How to be targeted? How to be targeted?
We're getting over now, and now we're running across the street, and we hear shots coming from like Hooters, MGM area, over there. There was shots coming from over there, and there was shots going from Mandalay Bay.
Every other person that I've talked to that did get unfortunately hit as well have all said the same things.
They know that there was multiple shooters.
Sounded like there were a dozen shooters.
The New York Excalibur shooting was right outside. It wasn't inside. It was outside. We saw the muzzle flashes.
I don't want to.
I just found it in the street, brother. 223 round, right here.
Anyone got a glove?
Okay? I don't think any help.
10 shooters.
I just want you guys to know.
Love it.
Somebody handed me a 223 round they found on the ground outside.
Outside there?
That's not a 223.
There's outside.
Yeah. Somebody was coming in from here, it'd be the north side. North side? Yep, somebody was coming in. How many? Just one? Just one.
They kept coming. That's the thing. It wasn't that, okay, let's all leave and now it's okay. No. We all started running and they came in. That's why there's no humanly possible way that guy, that was the only shooter. And there's definitely someone on the ground.
Concert. I'm waiting for somebody to come through that entrance because it sounds like they're on the ground.
The gunfire's approaching where we were. They just started getting closer and closer and louder and louder. And
this video
I
is
knew
2
we were getting
hours.
gunshots that were closer to us than where they originally started, and that's when we knew we had to run.
All I know is that the burst of shots were very quick, and they didn't last long. They were not 15 seconds long like the Mandalay Bay shooter was.
Now it sounds like it's coming from farther away.
There was also shooting going on inside of the Mandalay Bay.
It sounded like more than one machine gun, and it just didn't stop.
We heard gunshots from around the corner. We were in the Delano, right next to a walkway that connects the Mandalay Bay and the Delano.
Multiple shots fired.
We were on the furthest VIP stages away from Mandalay Bay, and they were ricocheting everywhere where we were. So they were firing from somewhere high, and they were unloading clip after clip after clip after clip.
He was a shooter, you believe?
Multiple shooters.
Multiple shooters.
It has to be.
But it flew low enough that I could see that there was a black curtain, the door was open, and the color of the instrument panel. It flew right over our heads. As soon as it got in front of Mandalay Bay, it kind of rose up in altitude, and that's when we heard the gunshots. I turned to my left immediately, looked up at the helicopter, and it was just like, what the hell? That was automatic gunfire. I'm thinking to myself, my girlfriend responds to me. She goes, babe, did you hear that helicopter? And I go, what about that helicopter? She says, it sounded funny.
The 25th.
And I go, what do you mean it sounded funny? She goes, it just sounded weird. I go, that wasn't the helicopter. That was automatic gunfire. And then as we're talking about it, I turn my head to my left again, and I look at the helicopter, and I see it circle around Mandalay Bay towards the back end of it, and there's no gunshots. As soon as it comes back to the front of Mandalay Bay, you hear the brrr again, and then it flies off again.
Tell it that night, but I just, for some reason, I just knew it was coming out of that helicopter. But I was so unbelievably certain that it was coming from the helicopter.
Yes, we have all kinds of help on the way, okay? Everything's going to be okay. We're getting officers out there.
Things are going to start happening.
Okay.
You're going to see the
officers on the sky because he's flying in a helicopter. You think he's in a helicopter? Yes.
I almost felt like
I'm
there was
playing a video of the Route 91 shooting. There's 10 shooters.
Sound.
There's an active shooter on the airport. This is a blanket broadcast for all aircraft. Just a heads up.
Hey, yes, we need police. This is Kid Flamingo. We just got a call right now saying shots fired in the back parking lot, employee parking lot area. You know, just so you know, we had got before the shots fired, we did have a guest who brought a gun to officers out near valet. So it was a gun found also near the valet entrance.
This is fucking crazy. There's a shooter on the hallway. Right across from the area sign, and there's
Relax. It's okay.
on the bridge right across from the area
Relax.
sign.
Relax. Okay.
They said at the bottom of Delano, the casino level of the Delano, and I saw two gunmen with look like AR-15 type rifles come around the corner.
Okay. I hope. Okay. Okay, now relax. Relax. Relax.
Right here. Oh shit, that's machine gun.
I understand.
We were given no answers. We were given no motive. Confused people woke up the next day to find the news focused only on Paddock and the concert, with no reporting by the news of anything else that happened on the strip that night.
Bless you. Feel good. Yep. Take care.
And I know damn well I heard a gunshot inside this building.
We thought so too.
Election.
Yeah, and then it never got covered.
No election in
No one ever
November
talked
5th.
about it.
Did you hear it?
Yes, we did. Yeah,
How
me
many
and
did
my
you hear?
coworker
I heard
actually
two.
Yeah, I know. And then we saw people running. Yeah.
For them to lie and say there's one shooter when there's multiple shooters. To disarm the American people and enable these guys. Chris Murphy is an enabler of mass shootings.
I saw casings right here. Right around here? So there were beer cans, there were empty drink cups, and there were maybe a dozen really brass 1.5-inch, 2-inch tubes spread out.
As if someone was shooting right here.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't in a pile, they weren't in a bunch, they weren't touching each other, they were spread out. So, yeah.
I walked over by the topic can, I found bullet. It was still some on the ground. Where? In the parking lot. Where? At the top can of parking lot. Part of the parking lot. Right where they made their triage, right almost by the door. All the door.
So I sat down at a slot machine inside of Planet Hollywood. Now I hear gunfire over the sound of the casino. More gunfire, much closer. I would estimate it had to be within a half block. People are starting to pour in. So I go to the cashier, he looks at the timestamp, whatever, and so he asked me, were you here with all that went down last night? I said, yeah. He said, what happened? And so I told him briefly. He looks at the cashier next to him, he said, I told you. So she looks back at him and says, well, why are they telling you guys not to say so? He was like, I don't know, I didn't say so, she did, pointing at me. So from that, I gathered that the employees that were even there at the time were threatened to keep their damn mouths shut. Period. A whole lot of stuff went down. And almost none of it is being reported on mainstream news. Almost none of it.
No explanation was ever given about any of the other shots heard, casings found, guns found, helicopters that weren't supposed to be there, or any other gunmen seen across the strip that night. The LVPD simply wrote it off like nothing happened, which also meant they weren't pulling footage or actively investigating any of it either. To this day, it has been a constant uphill battle with law enforcement for even the most simplest of answers about the shooting.
It was my understanding before I had said he had gotten separated. That was inaccurate. What had happened was he was conducting an investigation based on customers calling in, and he was personally attempting to locate what was occurring. He happened upon that doorway because it was ajar, which keyed his interest. But our officers were in close proximity, so as you can imagine by the timeline there, as soon as they came out of the doorway of the elevator, he was there. So it happened in a matter of seconds.
Officials had to be sued to release reports, autopsies, body cam footage, and to this day, many journalistic FOIAs requesting further evidence in what is supposed to be public information have been illegally ignored. For some reason, officials have outright refused to be forthcoming about this investigation on any level.
And most of you are used to how I conduct myself in these conferences, so I will call upon you and then determine whether I will answer your question.
I've read through the police reports, listened to 911 calls, police scanners, and hard-saved every video I could get my hands on before the powers that be could scrub them from the internet. After flip-flopping on timelines, refusing to answer basic questions, and raising public suspicion because authorities felt the need to be so evasive about everything, videos relating to evidence of multiple shooters or alternative narratives were banned, censored, and suppressed on major social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Because, Lord forbid, people question the FBI's narrative of a 64-year-old man unloading over 1,000 rounds in 10 minutes.
This is exactly what they did with Stephen Barrier in Stamford, Connecticut. They paid bribes, $30 million in bribes. This is what the Stamford Police Department does. This is what the Norwalk Police Department does. This is what the Darien Police Department does. This is what Wilton does. This is what East Haven does. This is what Easton does. These are towns that do the same thing that these assholes are doing.
With absolutely no motive, no history of mental illness, no known political affiliation, and all the while shots are being heard across the strip long after they find him dead.
YouTube alters algorithms.
That's a shot. They sure didn't want us to see everything that happened on Metro 5's helicopter cam that night, or how hotel staff helped load all the gun cases up their own service elevator. But they sure wanted us to know that he was dead and the case shut and closed by purposefully leaking out an immediate photo of a fresh blood stain on top of a dry one? Huh? And how did he get underneath the rifle here? Or throw the pistol he supposedly uses up and over so far behind his head? And what's the blood stain on his chest about? And if you're wondering, no, there's no forensics available on his blood splatter to prove he actually committed suicide at all. And the coroner put Paddock's time of death down as noon the next day. So we have no idea when he actually died. That didn't stop Lombardo from declaring in his final report that Paddock died in a very specific 2-minute window based off, nothing. Although I did find buried in a report that their heat sensor stopped picking up readings in the room at that time, which, considering it takes a body over 12 hours to become cool to the touch and 24 to the core, sort of implies he didn't just off himself a minute earlier. I guess we weren't supposed to notice these things? I'm hoping this video will break through the media blackout and reignite the public's interest to start demanding the answers from authorities we rightfully deserve. There were absolutely multiple shooters using multiple calibers at different locations at night. And it was by definition a terrorist attack. Either foreign, domestic, or both. And it was purposefully covered up for reasons I hope after this will come to light.
There is no conspiracy between the FBI, between LVMPD, and the MGM. Nobody is attempting to hide anything.
Being called a conspiracy theorist with the evidence on 5G is insane. We can also prove election fraud. Same damn people.
As much time as I put into this reveal, I owe an immense credit to the work of all the citizen journalists that came before me, searching for their own answers. Between the electronic hotel door lock information that revealed both doors to both rooms opening from the inside at the same time that night, proving Paddock wasn't alone.
A key card was tried from the outside, denied. Key card was tried from the outside again, denied. And then what we call the impossible event happens. The door opens from the inside.
To audio examination of the gunfire by a sound editor with 20 plus years experience, proving multiple guns were used at the same time.
Look at the symmetry. Look at that symmetry. They're in the same place. They just moved up a few feet. Shots coming from the same point. One gun here. Here, they're back, maybe 15 feet. You can hear the guns in the background, and you can hear the primary in the background. I hope you can. At least you can see it in the waveform because it's all erratic. Look at the difference between that and that. Same guy, same body cam, same officer, same alleyway, big difference. So these are some of the questions that have to be answered. I hope this helps, and eventually may the truth prevail. God bless America.
To a detailed breakdown of radar imagery from that night that shows covert actions by aircraft that the LVPD never tried to explain or even acknowledge.
And they're going to stop directly behind the Mandalay Bay. So this first one hovers right there, right over Mandalay Bay, right over the event center, kind of oval-shaped roof. Here comes the third and the fourth. Notice that first helicopter, what happened is it turned off its transponder. These other two are about to do the same, and they turn off their transponders as well. And they remained there, no transponder signals come back on for the duration of the shooting. So they turned off their transponders at about 9:52.
Why would they turn off their transponders?
And no more transponders will appear in that area. But what's interesting is that even though we have no radar data showing flights in that area, video evidence clearly shows flights being in that area during the shooting. I want you to notice as we watch this clip, the flashes coming from behind and in between Mandalay Bay and Delano Towers. There's no aircraft in the air at this time according to flight data, but we see lights flashing in there, which have to come from aircraft because there's no other buildings tall enough for them to be coming from this perspective. The flashes are inconsistent. They're not normal, consistent flashes like you would see from beacons or anti-collision lights. So it's possible these flashes.
This lady did a fantastic job.
To uncovering that Metro knew by 1 a.m. that night that there were 3 women other than the girlfriend registered at Paddock's room that Lombardo never felt the need to investigate, explain, or even publicly mention.
And he's registered there with 3 other females. I don't know if you want all their names.
Why is it documented, right? The 3 women were inside the room and they redacted their names from the document. And for some reason, not only did they lie about Paddock being alone in the room, but they are hiding who these women are. And I think that we're going to really learn a lot more about what happened in Vegas once we learn the identities of these 3 women.
To in-depth interviews and autopsy reports that don't line up with Metro's conclusion of a single shooter.
Could this be where the shooters are, and that it's not coming from room 32-135? Why don't we see that aircraft on Flight Radar 24? At this moment in time, there's nothing on Flight Radar.
And while anomalies can always occur with ricochets, etc., it doesn't explain how so many trajectories don't match up to a gunman on the 32nd floor in a building across the street. Multiple witnesses stated in reports they saw people get hit straight on, as if the shots were coming from ground level, and how the shots sounded closer the further they ran away from Mandalay Bay.
All of a sudden, we hear the little whizzing going by us, and the bullets are just flying by. And when something's coming up and down, or at least from a different angle, they're either going to hit the ground, they're going to, a lot of different things are going to happen. When someone's shooting from a straight horizontal line, it's just going to keep flying. As soon as we heard a little break in it, we knew we had to keep running.
So I did a little bit more digging, and based off what I was able to match between victim reports and the anonymous autopsy findings using things like gender, weight, eye and hair color, tattoos, and the descriptions and placement of their wounds, was able to analyze several of the more unusual trajectories. Am I an expert at this? No. But I can read reports and do basic math, which is apparently more effort than the FBI put into this entire investigation. They didn't run ballistics to match the bullets from the victims to the guns in the room either. None that they're willing to release anyway. Most fatalities were hit at the diagonal and downward angle you would expect from someone firing from Mandalay Bay, but not everybody. Those yellow circles are people that were hit with a near-perfect parallel ground trajectory, within a difference of a ½ inch or less. While some could simply be ricochets, this seems more like a pattern, and coupled with so many witnesses stating they heard shots coming from the main stage and at ground level, certainly deserves more of an investigation than it was given. At least 19 out of the 58 autopsies appear to have parallel trajectories from what I can tell from these reports.
58.
That blue circle, the second closest victim to Mandalay Bay, he was hit almost vertically from the top of his head down. That extreme elevated trajectory happened to at least 3 other individuals that night.
It's important where all the bodies were found, right? The first 20 we call were found in front of the stage, and a lot of them had headshots. Then there was a group of 6 bodies that were found in close proximity right between the church and the festival grounds. So this would be on the street on the east side of the festival grounds, which is behind a long privacy wall. They were found along the fence line. So there's no way that a person, if you can't shoot what you can't see.
Speaking of weird coincidences, there's also the never reported on by mainstream news of Australian Brian Hodge, who claimed almost immediately in both social media posts and in interviews that he was the one staying in room 32-134 next to the shooter. You know, the one directly adjoined to Paddock's that Metro had to blow in because it was locked from the other side. Where he would claim to be during the shooting would change several times, but he also unintentionally in those early interviews mentioned very specific details about the shooting that weren't known to the public at the time. He knew a special hammer was used to break the hurricane-proof window in the room.
So there's no balconies. He actually he checked in the hotel on Thursday and came with a specific hammer that's designed to break that glass. Whatever the glass is that casinos have, a double pane or bulletproof or whatever it is, but was able to smash that glass and then actually shoot out through the glass that way. So cracked a massive big hole in the window pane.
And much like the FBI and LVPD would falsely push, he also claimed Paddock checked into Mandalay Bay on Thursday the 28th, which is interesting because, number one, he supposedly just checked in himself the night before, so it's not like he could have ran into Paddock those days earlier by accident. And 2, the real check-in date was actually on the 25th, which for some reason Lombardo decided to lie to the public about during a press conference the next day, even though dispatch logs showed he 100% already knew the real check-in date was the 25th, and that there were 3 other women other than the girlfriend registered to his room. Hodge also assumed the security guard that walked down the hall was shot and killed, which, given the amount of bullets that came through the door, was shocking he wasn't. Hodge also manipulated the GPS on his phone that day to hide his whereabouts both before and after the shooting. He lied about hiding in the bushes as officers clearing the area never saw anyone in them, and he also posted what many have dubbed a trophy photo of him at the crime scene. Listen to this interview he gives to the Australian press less than 24 hours after the incident, where he's so enveloped in pushing the narrative that things, aka gun rights, need to change in America, that he prematurely reveals knowing almost exactly how many guns were in the room, even though news stations at the time were reporting less.
Time to reflect on it, but one thing that's really kind of come out of this, I think it needs to change. I think they really need to think about it, and I realize that it's not safe. The security here is not great. I've always loved that Vegas is very free. You know, you come here, people have a good time. But last night it really kind of hit me that I was like, I don't think that's the right way going forward. I don't think being able to walk in with 20 machine guns and not get noticed and have scopes in your room set up for 3 days.
There were 24 guns found between the 2 rooms, 22 semi-automatic rifles, if you minus the bolt action and the revolver. How did he know that? And how did he know how long they were there for? His politics leaned left, if you couldn't tell from his anti-gun rhetoric, and almost immediately an Australian Antifa group on Facebook took credit for the shooting, stating one of their own had committed the attack on what was, let's keep it real, a mostly Trump-supporting crowd. Fact-checkers deemed it fake, not because they actually checked it out, but because the account only had 800 followers, which sounds like 800 too many idiots for me. There are actually fake Antifa accounts out there run by right-wing trolls, maybe some of them my friends, but last I checked, even joking about a terrorist attack will get you a knock on the door from authorities. Well, when they're actually trying to solve the crime anyway. How Brian Hodge knew so much insider information about the shooting before anyone else did, we'll never know, because the FBI's top brass forbid anyone, including their own agents, from investigating him, and he was allowed to leave the country without even being questioned about what his connection to Paddock was. He was actually registered to room 32314, not 32134, although you have to wonder why he recalled the room number of the shooting over his own. 134 was registered to Paddock's girlfriend Mary Lou Daniels using her comps and not his for whatever reason. You know, the one he wired $100,000 to and whose fingerprints are on the bullets inside the magazine.
His girlfriend Mary Lou Danley, you see her there, who claims no foreknowledge of the shooting spree, has admitted now that her fingerprints are probably on some of the ammo because, get this, she helped load the cartridges. I have other information on her, too. You're not going to want to miss that coming up.
Who, coincidentally like Hodge, is also connected to the Gold Coast casinos in Australia. She shut down her Facebook almost immediately, but not before people spotted the ISIS beheading videos her friends were posting. Funny how Facebook can't get sex trafficking and snuff films off their platform, but they'll probably ban this video just for criticizing the narrative. LVPD also didn't think it was necessary to take witness statements from most of the other people on the floor that night. Kind of hard to come up with a motive when you're not investigating any possible leads as to why. Speaking of reports the LVPD didn't want us to see, Paddock had 19 guns at home, so why did he buy 23 more leading up to the shooting? Does the FBI really want us to believe the majority of the shooting that everyone swears was automatic was done entirely by ARs with bump stocks that magically never jammed as they're so notoriously known to do?
How does a bump stock compare to a standard rifle?
So basically it's using opposite forces. Put your finger there, you pull forward, pulls the trigger, and the recoil sends it back. And then you pulling forward causes it to pull the trigger again, and the recoil sends it back. So it creates a bounce effect. But you have to get it just right or else it's severely inaccurate.
Standard rifle on the right, bump stock on the left. 30-round magazine. The bump fire malfunctioned on the first test. Here's the second.
Severely unreliable, and I wouldn't waste my money on it. They can have it.
Don't get me started on how they supposedly know how many times each gun was fired, either. So they had the manpower to match ballistics on 1,000 casings, but not on the bullets that hit 58 people? And how do they know exactly what order the shots were and when they hit or missed the fuel tanks? Is there footage that shows that we don't know about? LVP also states that Paddock used 15 different guns that night, 8 of which don't have scopes. Instead of, just reloading one of the guns that had a scope with any of the bajillion loaded magazines laying around. He really didn't think he needed a scope for this shot? Not bad for a 64-year-old man that, according to his pilot license, wasn't allowed to fly without corrective lenses. Could only hit the fuel tanks the size of a house 2 out of 8 times, though. Weird. Why does this feel like a gun sale gone bad? Why is the FBI protecting what could be the main accomplices to this crime? Why in less than 24 hours after the incident, and with overwhelming evidence to the contrary, were authorities so insanely insistent that there was only one shooter and he was dead?
Right now, we believe it's a sole actor, a lone wolf type actor.
It was a sole shooter. There is no further threat that we're aware of, no immediate threat.
I want to emphasize we believe Paddock is solely responsible for this heinous act.
The quickness it was dropped from the media when they normally capitalize on tragedies like this for their own political gain tells me they were worried people would start connecting dots they shouldn't be and continuing to ask questions that authorities couldn't answer. At the end of the day, they shot at a pro-Second Amendment crowd full of country folk, veterans, and gun enthusiasts that I can tell by reading through these statements immediately recognize the sounds of multiple shooters and different calibers that don't match up with the single shooter narrative they're being force-fed by authorities. They recognize that shots were coming from all around them, even with a blinking strobe light planted halfway up Mandalay Bay that weekend, confusing people as to where the shots were coming from. And man, wouldn't you like to know who put that there, considering that could have been a purposeful distraction?
It's not that blinking light, no. Two shooters right there in that room.
These were good people, men shielding women from harm, civilians risking their lives to help strangers and assist law enforcement. At the end of the day, they didn't just give up and bow down to terrorism. They deserved to know what really happened that night. Las Vegas is one of the most surveilled cities in the entire country. So where is all the footage? Why are we stuck with such a half-ass, incomplete investigation with so many holes in it for one of the largest attacks in our history? This cannot be chalked up to pure incompetence or lack of resources. Something this poorly done has to be intentional. We've got Sheriff Lombardo nervously bumbling through press conferences, not even knowing the most basic facts of the case, and misleading the public for whatever reason on purpose by changing the timeline to either suit his poor reaction time or to benefit Mandalay Bay and their legal liability.
My attempt, like I stated earlier, is to give you the information as I know it, unverified, to calm the public, not to establish a legal case. Everybody understand that? No question, sir.
Wait, what? Did he just admit he's not trying to establish a legal case? Why don't you just come out and say you have no intentions on solving this? Why is his biggest concern calming the public? Wouldn't the public be more calm if we actually got some answers about this tragedy? And why does FBI agent Aaron Reeves creepily nod in agreement every time Lombardo lies or says something dumb? Why can't he answer any of the public's reasonable questions? Like, who took Paddock's hard drive from the room? It certainly wasn't Paddock. He's dead on the floor. We know someone was actively monitoring the hallway, so was that what was on the stolen hard drive? Why was Paddock's house left unguarded and allowed to be broken into? Are we really supposed to believe the excuse that the police left it unlocked and the wind blew it open? Really? Why were officers told multiple times to turn their body cams off?
I got that email.
Keep in mind, Sheriff Lombardo is not above lying to the public. He's the same guy who lied under oath about what really happened at the Bundy Ranch standoff, even though the whole thing was on camera. Federal corruption and Lombardo's perjury cost Clive Bundy 2 years of his life in jail. And that was after the feds tried extorting over $1 million from him in cattle grazing fees over land that wasn't even theirs. Then you've got Lombardo's friend, former Commissioner Steve Sisolak, who was not governor at the time, but capitalized on the massacre to get his face in front of the cameras to further his own political career, even going as far as to brand the Route 91 shooting generically as 1 October, which was specifically done to help make people forget it ever happened. It's a term only law enforcement and news channels really use, as most people outside the state won't even know what you're talking about unless you tell them you're specifically talking about the Las Vegas country concert shooting. Once he used the tragedy to become
58
governor,
people were
Sisolak would go on to do a slew of mobby corrupt things, like put his good friend and campaign donor, the CEO of MGM himself, Jim Murray, in charge of the economy-destroying COVID task force, which is a whole other expose for another time. Jim Murray, if you don't know who he is a radical leftist that served on the National Infrastructure Advisory Council under Obama and donates to CARE, which has serious known ties to Islamic terrorism. Interesting. He also sold off $10 million of MGM stock 3 weeks before the shooting, and then MGM had to pay him $32 million to leave on top of that.
Trump did what?
So instead of getting punished for the extreme lack of security, he made out. But not before he laid off a ton of workers to pay for it. Under Murray, MGM also had the audacity to sue over 1,000 of their shooting victims and their families, claiming the casino wasn't liable, and then rip the rest of them off by only having to give out a fraction of the expected settlement costs that MGM's insurance covered most of anyway. Which I'm sure has nothing to do with the judge in the case also being the daughter of the current vice president of security of MGM at the time.
You are the only person that we know of at this point who's actually opted out of the lawsuit and fired your lawyer.
I went to my lawyer and said, can you tell me who the mediator's going to be? I didn't get a response. And I was doing research, and I said, please tell me it's not Jennifer Tagliati. And he writes me back, he says, it is Jennifer Tagliati. I said, she's the one person that should never be around this case because her father is the VP of Security and Surveillance for MGMRI at the time of the event.
There's a lot to unravel here, so let's break it down minute by minute. All the things they don't want you to know about the Las Vegas Route 91 shooting. According to LVPD's report on what was on Paddock's home computer, 3 months before the shooting, Paddock sent an email to himself about 3 random AR and bump stock sale ads. If you're thinking, that doesn't make sense, and that can't be all they found, and why are they so obsessed with bump stocks, let me just get this out of the way right now. Nothing will make sense about the conclusions Lombardo and the FBI come up with about the shooting. According to SEC filings in August, George Soros bought $42 million worth of put options on MGM. That means he's betting their stocks will fall, and when he does, he'll make a killing. Because, hey, is it even really an evil conspiracy theory without George Soros somehow involved? Starting on September 10th in 2017, 3 cryptic messages from the same anonymous user pop up on Reddit foreseeing an upcoming planned false flag event in Vegas. He warns people to stay away from large crowds because the government is working on something called a high incident project to make the American public think places with security aren't safe enough and create more regulations requiring metal detectors in casinos, etc. He specifically states OSI and the Chertoff Group will be involved, although he's not certain of the exact date, but that Vegas is on their mind. What's interesting is that Snopes scoffs at the messages as unproven, not because they couldn't prove they were false or true, but because they deemed it too vague to be taken seriously. Sounded pretty specific to me. If you don't know who Chertoff is, he's Bush's former Secretary of Homeland Security, where despite the major conflict of interest, he demanded agencies install certain security machines, which he just so happened to own the companies for. He's better known as a co-sponsor of the Patriot Act, where he used the tragedy of 9/11 to push through legislation that would allow the government to spy on Americans through our phones and computers without a warrant. If you're not familiar with Snowden, watch Citizen4 for homework tonight, and you'll quickly understand how the deep state is able to blackmail and control everyone into oblivion. It's also in September that MGM execs approve a $1 billion share repurchase program. Yet despite that push, by the end of the week, Jim Murray would divest himself of 80% of his own MGM stock. Did he foresee something drastic happening that would lower their worth? Aside from Mandalay Bay, MGM Resorts also owns Luxor, Bellagio, New York, the Mirage, and the MGM Grand. Keep those in mind for later when, despite overwhelming evidence including 911 calls made by their own security, they all deny shootings occurred on their property. Murin is also a member of the National Infrastructure Advisory Council, where he advises how to implement security technology in public places.
Denied
Does that sound familiar?
shootings on their properties.
And yes, increased security to the financial benefit of those investors in those products is exactly what ended up happening, just like those ominous Reddit posts said. It ultimately didn't work out because turns out no one wants to be constantly irradiated and go through TSA-like screening just to get to their room or eat dinner. They made money off trying, though, which is good enough for these kinds of people. On September 30th, a police report taken after the shooting stated a witness believed they saw Paddock playing craps at a table with 2 Hispanic women. It could be something, it could be nothing, we'll never know. because this is just one of the many possible leads the public is never made aware of on how it actually concluded, or if it was even looked into at all. I have to also mention that the day before the attack, the powers that be were running active shooter drills across Las Vegas, which added to the confusion, especially when people tried calling hospitals. It also fed into the hoax theory that no people died because they were searching for and hiring crisis actors for the same thing all week, which was used as an excuse by the media to condemn and censor all alternative theories about the tragedy. People died there. That's not the conspiracy. The conspiracy is why so many government-run active drills turn real at the same time in the same manner. Remember 9/11, when there was a huge confusion going on with air traffic controllers because one of the drills they were running also involved hijacked planes going into New York skyscrapers? Or the Boston Marathon bombing, where yet again the government was running a bomb drill that turned real, and instead of just addressing it, the feds decided to suspiciously and combatively blow off reporters about it instead.
Bomb drill.
Next question, please. Next question, please. Yes. Yes.
There's a lot more instances than that, and definitely more to it, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Let's just say if you hear the government's running terrorist drills in your area, leave town immediately. From 3:24 a.m. to 7:36 a.m., Paddock plays video poker on the casino floor.
Sandy Hook was a FEMA mass shooting drill. The Boston bombing was a bombing drill, and 9/11 was a aircraft drill.
Then he returns to the smaller side room. I can only assume he took a nap after gambling all night or something, because nothing really happens again until 12:03, when the doors to both rooms open from the inside at the same time, which means there were at least 2 people inside the room the entire time, and both guest cards are checked to see if they work.
Especially when you're looking at anomalies, when you have the door opening from the inside of both rooms at the same time.
That means there was at least 2, if
At least 2, if not more. At least 2, if not more.
I have no idea at this point how Lombardo can insist Paddock was alone that night, but let's let the charade continue, shall we? From 12:12 to 12:26 p.m., Paddock goes to the garage to move his car into valet. Apparently making it downstairs and all that mayhem and getting his car to valet is Lombardo's idea of Paddock's getaway plan. Notice how Newsweek, who has wrongly personally fact-checked me before, claims the getaway plan failed because SWAT moved in, which we all know didn't happen for over an hour. This fake getaway plan is necessary to explain why Paddock paid off all his taxes before this suicide mission. If you've ever gotten your car out of Las Vegas valet before, then you know there's nothing quick about it. 12:29 is the last time Paddock is captured alive on video as he returns from the valet to his room. Since he has adjoining rooms and it can get confusing, I'll refer to 135, the large suite he was found in, as his room, and the smaller 134 as the side room. At 12:23, a room service ticket is made for 134 for 2 entrees. At 3:35, a single gunshot is heard and reported by a guest staying on Paddock's floor. We only know about this incident because fellow Route 91 investigator Nephi Kaliki heard it from the witness themselves.
And I need to be sensitive about this because the person that was on that floor, we have contact with that person. One of their family members died at the event, but they were staying on that same floor. They heard a gunshot at 3:45 in the afternoon. And at 4 o'clock, around the same time, the locks start getting manipulated for 18 minutes in a way that is not explainable for normal operations.
Was this single gunshot an accidental discharge? Or maybe even when Paddock was actually shot? We'll never know, because like I said, the coroner lied about the time of death on the autopsy. They had to be personally sued to release. The report contains such hidden gems like there being unexplained signs of blunt force trauma to Paddock's calves and knees. After that single shot is heard, there's a moment of inactivity followed by a series of weird hotel key testing that occurs to both doors 134 and 135 in what seems to be an attempt to capture and alter the electronic door system code. By the way, did the hotel ever investigate that complaint about the early gunshot, or did they cover it up because not checking into it makes them even more legally liable than they already were? At 6:40 p.m., the door to Paddock's room is opened from the inside, then the deadbolt is released, and then the door is closed again, opened again, and closed again. Okay, how the hell did the door just open with the deadbolt still on? It seems by now someone has figured out how to manipulate the electronic door locks, as impossible sequences and constant testing like this continue on both doors throughout the night. At around 9:20 and about 45 minutes before the shooting begins, a Hispanic woman pushes her way to the front of the crowd at the festival, starts telling the woman in front of her she was going to die and that everyone around them was going to die tonight. It causes such a commotion that security has to come to remove her and the Hispanic male she was with. Did security get their info? Was this ever investigated at all?
There's a lady who pushed her way forward into the concert venue into the first row, and she started messing with another lady and told us that we were all going to die tonight.
Do you know why she was saying that? I mean, was this after the shots were fired?
It was about 45 minutes before the shots were actually fired, but then she was escorted out by security.
At 9:29, both Paddock and the side room doors open from the inside at the same time again. Another impossibility unless there's at least one other person in the room, and now it's only 35 minutes to when the shooting begins. There's also another weird instance where it opens and the deadbolt is still reading as closed. It seems important to someone to be able to manipulate the deadbolts in particular. Starting at 9:38, radar shows that 3 helicopters, supposedly registered to Mustang Leasing, depart from the vicinity of Mavericks and head north off screen.
And you can see their call signs, their tail numbers. That third one turned its transponder on a little bit late.
5 minutes later at 9:45, the same 3 helicopters that left earlier begin to return from the north, head south across the strip, and then stop and begin to hover above the Mandalay Bay area for several minutes. By 9:50, all 3 helicopters hovering above Mandalay Bay turn off their transponders 15 minutes before the shooting begins, and they do not go back on until after the shooting at the festival ceases. We know they were physically there because multiple eyewitnesses and videos catch them going back and forth between Luxor and the Mandalay Bay throughout the shooting. At 9:55, a helicopter blips on screen with no call sign and heads north out of the area, followed by another one about a minute later, also without a call sign, and they both head north.
And then we see that again, a separate helicopter, different timestamp again, heading up north, no call sign.
At 9:59, security guard Jesus Campos is doing his rounds on door ajar alarms, and however long that takes him. He couldn't open the stairwell to 32, so he goes back down a floor to take the elevator up instead. He reports the barricaded door and hearing what he thought were rapid drilling sounds while checking on the other room, implying the shooting was already going on at the time. That's when bullets come down the hall through Paddock's closed door at him. Shots also come down the hall sometime during all this when engineer Steve Shuck is there to check on why the stairwell door was braced shut. Another excuse given as to why the LVPD didn't breach the room right away was because of this impenetrable mighty L bracket, which honestly I feel like even I could have kicked in an emergency. There's no proof or fingerprints or anything that I could find that suggests Paddock put it in, although that didn't stop Metro from claiming they knew he did anyway. At 10:04 p.m., the 2 helicopters with no call signs return from the north, presumably the same ones that left a little earlier, and land at the airport. Mavericks is at the beginning of the runway in the blue circle. These 2 land here at the highlighted part at Sundance Helicopters, which is now out of business. Funny thing is, that location will end up receiving multiple 911 calls throughout the night about shots being fired, a woman injured with a gunshot in the hangar, and people hiding from suspects on the premise in a possible hostage situation. These helicopters you see here are likely just coming back from a tour, judging by their route, but what the hell happens there later? Seems like it's at least worth looking into, but there are no records this was ever investigated at all. At 10:05 and 27 seconds, the first scattered shots at the festival begin, which many initially thought were fireworks or firecrackers, with several witnesses claiming they actually saw a man weaving through the crowd letting firecrackers and poppers off at this time. Their obvious concerns were that he was providing some sort of initial cover, or tricking bystanders into not panicking as much, or even gauging the wind for snipers. And no, the police never looked for that suspect either. Metro also seems to be confused as to how many shots there were, which according to them were either 2 or undetermined, and I'll tell you why. Now, when I listen to the video, I specifically hear 2 very clear close rifle shots coming from the main stage area, followed eventually by a mixture of a couple of close shots and further away automatic gunfire with echoes. Multiple witness statements also mention hearing very distinct and different caliber weapons at this time. For instance, this witness not only heard the automatic firing from Mandalay Bay, but also something more like a handgun closer to her vicinity in the parking lot. This man staying at a balcony near the foundation room in the middle of Mandalay Bay heard automatic gunfire coming from his right and rifle fire from his left. Another man whose room overlooked the concert claims he heard not only the reverberating outside shots, but closer, non-reverberating, shorter round bursts as well. This woman stated she heard the first 2 pop-pop sounds that sounded like they came from inside the concert grounds that sounded different than the rifle sound she hears a little later. This man staying at the Four Seasons also hears 2 different calibers going off. What's strange is that these handful of supposedly scattered test shots are responsible for at least 1 immediate fatality. Witnesses saw a woman go down before any of the major automatic firing began, and I can't tell if they're all talking about the same victim or different females. Given a third of the fatalities were headshots, it seems a lot more targeted than it was random. Here's the video, and you tell me if you can hear 2 separate guns. And also take notice from here on out in all the videos, all the helicopters flying around Mandalay Bay that aren't supposed to be there. At 10:06 and 7 seconds, the first volley of automatic gunfire begins. An off-duty officer working the event stated in his report that it sounded like people were shooting at each other. His partner stated, as many others would that night, that it sounded like the shots were coming directly from the main stage area, and it was so loud he would have bet his paycheck that there was an assault team somewhere on the ground. At 10:06 and 53 seconds, the second volley begins.
Get down! Get down!
At 10:07 and 21 seconds, the third volley of automatic gunfire begins. It was at this time another witness at the event, Joe Napoli, stated he tried to escape east toward the parking lot, but like many witnesses stated before, the shots there sounded even closer, and people on the other side of the fence were screaming for him to turn back because there was a gunman on that side as well. People didn't just see someone with a gun in the parking lot that could have been mistaken for an officer either. They actually saw someone firing toward the crowd. He eventually flees north out of the venue, passing bodies in the street there, and like many others saw dozens of shell casings scattered near Tropicana, near that black circle at the top. And yes, gunmen were spotted multiple times by multiple witnesses at Tropicana throughout the night where these casings were found. The closer shots he heard coming from the parking lot near Gate 7 will later be confirmed over the police scanner. That second black circle, near Giles and Alibaba, is not only where casualties were found, but where police would find several live rounds and a loaded magazine in the street. This is probably the time to mention that broken pieces of a firearm mag and 4 cartridges were also found on Gate 2 on the
This is a huge cover-up.
opposite side of the venue. We only know about this because photographs of it were buried in a police report as evidence. But yeah, you know, one shooter. There's also the gun that guy finds in the street, which I can only guess is about here, judging on the video, because, of course, that's never mentioned by Lombardo either. At 10:07 and 50 seconds, the fourth volley of automatic gunfire begins.
Fourth.
At 10:08 and 43 seconds, more single shots can be heard, and one of the closest officers to Mandalay Bay sees a man on a platform, more than likely the bed, firing out of 134, the side room, out toward the fuel tanks. Only 8 casings were recovered in that room, and only 2 hit the tanks. But one of the few ARs that were reloaded were also found in that locked from the other side room.
I want to come back to that. I'm going to come back to that. Is it this bus?
Yeah, it's an open line with a female saying there's food. Female saying there's food.
Let's go over there.
Shots fired. There's many people down. Stage left.
Stay on this side. We need cover.
At 10:09 and 47 seconds, the fifth volley of automatic gunfire begins.
Fifth volley.
At 10:10 and 59 seconds, the 6th volley of automatic gunfire begins.
Go! Everybody go! Go! Run! Keep your head down! Go! Keep your head down! Go! Run! Keep your head down!
At 10:11 and 34 seconds, the 7th volley of automatic gunfire begins.
Keep your head down! Run! Go! Go! You guys go! Go!
Starting at 10:12, a group of what will eventually be a line of 8 helicopters start to take off from Mavericks, although not all of them will show up on radar as having actually left from that pad. This will play in later as the helicopters that previously turned their transponders off put them back on as they escape out with this group to the north. At 10:12 on the police scanner, there are now official reports of shots coming from Gate 7. Now, Gate 7 is interesting because whoever made the original graphic for the map to the concert venue doesn't have a Gate 7 listed, but has 2 Gate 2s. Gotta love bargain printing. But we know it was in the southeast corner because of witness statements, and it makes numerical sense. So I've made the corrections here for reference. You might also notice there's an abandoned motel in the middle of the venue, which any bad actor could have used to stage an attack from. And no, I don't see anything in the police reports about any forensics or an investigation being done inside there at all either. Later, 2 separate 911 calls would come in about suspicious men at the Oasis Apartments, which, as you can see on the map, is right across from the Gate 7 we're talking about. In one call, they even state that they could see 2 men changing their clothes in the bushes. I'd love to see the security cameras from those apartments at night, but it doesn't seem as if the FBI or the LVPD did much of investigating into anything. At 10:12 and 8 seconds, the 8th volley of automatic gunfire begins.
Go! Run that way! Go! 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 Stay there! Go! Gunfire stops! I don't know.
At 10:12 and 35 seconds, the 9th volley of automatic gunfire begins.
Stay down! Run that way! Against the wall! Stay down! Keep your head down!
At 10:13 and 30 seconds, the 10th volley of automatic gunfire begins.
Run that way!
After the 10th volley, you'll notice one of the helicopters that's not supposed to be there heading east over the venue.
Keep your head down! Run that way!
It's also at this time that a south-facing security camera in a parking lot 780 feet east of the venue picks up people running and trying to help, but ultimately leaving a deceased victim on the ground. For reference, this is its view. The only reason this video is known about is because it was sent to a Route 91 victims lawyer who then took it to Tucker Carlson. Being so close to the venue, the man didn't understand why the FBI and LVPD hadn't reached out to him or even asked if he had any security cam footage from that night. While Tucker is focused on why cops left a body there, what I found interesting is that you can clearly tell a helicopter was either hovering extremely close or landing nearby between 10:14 and 10:16, and 10:16 is when the shooting ends.
You can see a large amount of wind and debris. Apparently that's due to a helicopter hovering overhead.
This matches the footage I just showed you of a helicopter leaving Mandalay Bay and flying east. Remember, the east side is where people reported hearing shots, seeing gunmen, and where bullets, casings, and a magazine were also found. At 10:14 and 49 seconds, the 11th volley begins.
Keep your head down, run that way. Keep your head down, run that way.
You have to wonder why the U.S. Senate did not have a hearing about this, since they used it to disarm you.
Also at 10:14, Mandalay Bay security calls 911 and informs them that their security guard was shot and that it definitely came from 32135. There should be no confusion at this point where the shots from the hotel are coming from, yet Metro won't try to enter the room for over another hour. I find it interesting they fired one cop for cowering the hall, when really they were all on standby orders on the floor below supposedly waiting for SWAT, not that a proper SWAT team ever shows up, and not that that's ever explained why. It ends up being a mismatch of original responding officers at breach, including 2 canine units without their dogs. It's also at this time that everyone was still saying that there were 3 shooters. At 10:15 and 15 seconds, the 12th and final volley of automatic gunfire from Mandalay Bay begins. Between 10:16 and 10:18 is the 2-minute window, according to Lombardo, where he magically claims to know Paddock killed himself. Okay, whatever. And at 10:16, the same 3 helicopters that had disappeared earlier when they turned their transponders off above Mandalay Bay suddenly blip back up on the screen as part of that group of 8 that takes off up north. 2 of them pop up closer to the vicinity of Mavericks, while a third one blips up on screen between them in the air as they pass by the strip.
Is all 3 call signs from the original 3 helicopters that were behind Mandalay Bay that never returned show up there. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking about the helicopters that landed near Maverick helicopters, but they did not actually land at the Maverick helicopters location where these aircraft took off. They landed over here. So how did they get back over there? And they magically appear back on radar just after the shooting stopped at 10:16. Another interesting thing that I noticed was that the last helicopter in the original group of 3, call sign N848MH, actually turns its transponder on, pops up right there. It just popped up, and I'll show that to you frame by frame here. But it's like it never actually took off from Maverick helicopters, but perhaps left the shooting scene and joined that group formation and turned its transponder on right when it got into that group formation.
It's also at this time that a Southwest plane comes onto the radar with the call sign SW84119. The problem is it takes a sharp angle turn over the airport impossible for an airplane to do and heads directly over to the Mandalay Bay to hover above the Delano roof. This is only 2 minutes after firing at the festival ceases. I shouldn't have to tell you this, but this has to be a helicopter masquerading under a false call sign, as the original number is registered to a Southwest Boeing 737, whose flight records have it landing later at 10:22. While both share the same call sign, and I would love to know what the radar controllers were saying about this the whole time, the other mystery Southwest plane on the tarmac's tail number was N227W9 and not WN4119. That's a different aircraft completely. What the hell was going on at McCarran Airport that night? This is the part that bothers me, because the only entity I could think of that can get away with entering a heavily urban airspace, illegally turning off transponders, using fake call signs, and all the while being able to escape the notice of radar techs and employees at the airport would be our own government. I guess now we know why they keep refusing our FOIA request for the communications with McCarran that night. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say McCarran? I mean the Harry Reid Airport now, since corrupt Nevada politicians took it upon themselves, without so much as even asking the people who lived here, to rename it after one of the most divisive, hated politicians the state has ever known as their own vanity project. Gotta love what Las Vegas commissioners' priorities are in the middle of a huge economic crisis. At 10:21, the group of helicopters that previously took off to the north start to return south, and they all land at Mavericks like nothing ever happened. At 10:22, after hovering above the Delano roof for several minutes, the Southwest planecopter turns off its transponder. If you're wondering that despite all the distractions going on that night, if anyone happened to catch a helicopter near the roof of the Delano,
Here it is. Who should be held responsible for this crap?
He's hovering over Delano. It's not the Mandalay Bay. It's that motherfucker right there. You see that shit? I think we're safe now.
don't get too excited. Without a timestamp or a clearer video, we can't rule this out as being Metro, since they do show up right as the planecopter leaves, and since Metro did take one sweep at Delano's rooftop on radar at around 10:37 for some reason. This could all be solved by simply releasing the footage from the roof the entire night, but I won't hold my breath waiting for Lombardo to be forthcoming about any information that might actually help the case. Is now a good time to mention that Delano is also connected to the Mandalay Bay through a series of underground tunnels and hallways? It's also where a 911 call would come in later about 2 armed men in khakis firing off several rounds, which is something that would be backed up by other witnesses that heard it too.
We were herded into Delano's, and my friend and I, we were sitting there for about 10 minutes, and then we heard 4 to 5 shots ring out.
And we met up with these security guards and police officers who asked us what we were doing and told us to run away, and we heard gunshots from around the corner. We were in the Delano, right next to a walkway that connects the Mandalay Bay to Delano, and we heard gunshots from right out that hallway, so we think that the police were dealing with the shooter while we were down there.
At 10:24, Metro 5's helicopter finally arrives to the scene, 8 minutes after the shooting at the festival had already ceased.
Las Vegas Metro Police Department helicopter that just missed all the action.
One of the things Sheriff Lombardo was never able to explain was why he felt it was safe to wait over an hour to breach the room, or why their lone gunman just magically stopped shooting for no reason, despite all the unused guns, extra ammo, and the fact police weren't even at his door yet. Wouldn't it make more sense that what actually determined the length of the attack wasn't whenever the shooter randomly decided to give up, but how long it would take Metro to scramble a helicopter to the scene? All you would need to do is listen to a police scanner to know they're on their way. Another helicopter on the scene would have blown whatever air maneuvers were going on that night and probably whatever else was really going on. Starting at 10:24 and again at 10:34, reports come in about 2 separate suspicious vehicles bolting out and driving the wrong way down the strip. Suspects or just scared people trying to get away? I guess we'll never know. But don't tell me they couldn't pull those plates off security and traffic cams. From 10:27 to 10:33, Metro Helicopter 5 starts hovering over McCarran's airport runway, looking for something. At 10:35, there's reports of an active shooter on the runway. Okay, I guess we know what they were looking for now. And McCarran makes the decision to turn the lights off on both runways. Why? Wouldn't that make it easier for a shooter to hide or get away in whatever vehicle or aircraft they're obviously heading to the airport for? Did they miss their first helo extraction? At 10:38, Metro finally sends out their first tweet about the incident, already strangely implying it's a shooter in the singular, even though everyone on scene still believes there are multiple shooters and shots are still being heard outside the venue. This is actually around the time where all hell breaks loose, with hundreds of 911 calls about hearing shots and seeing gunmen across the strip in a pattern that keeps heading north away from the festival. At 10:43, there's a report of a suspicious white male seen wearing fatigues and going into a motorhome at the Motel 6 near Tropicana. 6 minutes later, a 911 call comes in about seeing 2 more suspicious men wearing bulletproof vests and walking calmly away from where everyone is running at the same location. The motel is directly east of the venue, right between the Tropicana and the airport, in that little blue circle right here. Also at 10:43 is when things start to get crazy over Sundance helicopters. A man calls about his girlfriend, who's the supervisor there, being pinned down with a bunch of people. He claims she heard shots outside, and there's a girl with a gunshot wound injured in the hangar. 15 minutes later, a woman calls in lieu of her daughter, because for some reason no one inside could get through to 911 like it was being blocked, that had also complained about hearing shots outside and a woman down with a gunshot wound. 10 minutes later, after the boyfriend calls back, saying his girlfriend now believes there are multiple suspects on the premise and everyone there is trying to hide from them. How was this never looked into? At 10:45, according to reports, EMTs call and complaining about being shot at the Tropicana.
Control 374, I got medics reporting that they're getting shot at in Tropicana.
10:51 is when the first report comes in at the Oasis Apartments from people hearing shots and seeing suspicious people there. A little while later, someone in the same apartments calls about 2 suspicious men changing in the bushes outside. The apartments are directly across from Gate 7, where shots were heard by multiple witnesses and at least 1 gunman was seen firing into the crowd from the parking lot. It's also at 10:51 that officers confirm over the radio that Mandalay Bay and the area of Giles and Alibaba is the second confirmed shooting location. I would love to tell you what the bullet forensics and the asphalt say about all this random trajectory, but as journalist Matt Couch noticed when he went to examine the location for himself, it had already been tarred over and repaired, making that impossible. At 10:52, Metro 5 lands in the parking lot at Harley-Davidson to load up a two-man sniper team for the next 8 minutes. According to Lombardo, at 10:55, 8 officers finally arrived to the stairwell adjacent to Paddock's room. 2 minutes later, and 52 minutes after the shooting began, they finally breached the barricaded stairwell door. At 10:59, Metro Helicopter 5's transponder goes dark and is unaccounted for the next 5 minutes. At 11:02, a Metro officer calls in a report about a suspicious person heading toward the Delano. At 11:03, a report comes in of an active shooter coming down the escalator from New York, New York, and no less than a minute later, 911 calls start pouring in about hearing shots there, including one from a security guard who specifically heard 5 to 6 shots fired near the Zumanity Theater, which is interesting because it would be someone from New York security that would later deny people heard shots there at all. Less than a minute after that call, reports of suspects down and a gunman at the front desk of New York, New York would come in. A minute after that, a woman calls 911 to describe the shooter she saw on the casino floor of New York, New York. Most of the reports and 911 calls would be corroborated and backed up by multiple witnesses like this throughout the night. Lombardo and MGM Resorts want you to believe that none of these things happened. But the fact they've never released the security cam footage from any of the hotels that night to settle it once and for all tells me it's probably the 1,000+ witnesses telling the truth and not hotels worried about hurting their tourism. At 11:07, another report of a shooter at the airport comes in, with people taking cover in a hangar from him there. At the same time, a report of a male getting out of a white Ford Dually running north with a rifle comes in. At 11:08, a man calls 911 in room 3135, which is only 2 floors down and directly below Paddock's, reports hearing a single gunshot that was also heard by his manager staying below him as well. It's been 10 minutes since SWAT breached the stairwell and 12 minutes before they would blow the door to 135 open, so what did they hear? It's also at 11:08 that a possible bomb threat comes in about a black Audi parked at Luxor with wires coming out of it. Something fake fact-checkers would later claim was false, even though the bomb squad had to be called in to check and clear it. At 11:10, a woman calls 911 to report 2 bodies down at Zumanity. This matches with the 911 call made by security there earlier. At 11:11, another wave of calls from Tropicana roll in, including reports of 2 gunmen on the roof. Somewhere between all these reports, a street security cam operator catches 2 people going back and forth on the roof. Check it out.
Knowing that the suspect would be very likely coming through that field of view. So probably a couple of camera operators communicating with one another.
At 11:17, someone's mother calls 911 to report that her daughter was shot at Fatburger and that there are shots being heard at that location now. At 11:18, an employee working at a restaurant inside Aria reports hearing a gunshot, which is quickly followed by a series of calls from other people hearing shots there as well. A moment after that, a man staying at the Cosmo reports seeing a man outside his window going batshit crazy with the gun on the walkway bridge right underneath the Aria sign. 1 minute before Paddock will be found dead, shots ring out at Bellagio. What follows will be a flood of 911 calls about a shooting at their entrance. A Canadian man claimed he and his wife were at the Bellagio taking photos when panic broke out in the hotel lobby just before 11:20. He heard someone yell, "There's a shooter," right before hearing 5 to 6 shots ring out. Renee Downs also witnessed and documented her experience there.
So we went to order a drink, and then all of a sudden, this huge crowd came rushing through the doors. The block things that you stand at the front, the red ropes, were all just, people weren't running around them, they were running over them. And we heard the gunfire. And the best that I can describe it, Tracy, is the fact that it was like if you take a board and you drop it on the floor, and it was like just this like that, and it was automatic. And I didn't know what kind of gunfire until my husband told me afterwards.
At 11:20, over an hour after the shooting began, Metro finally breaches Paddock's door. Anyway, we are limited in knowing what actually happened from here on out, as officers were constantly told throughout the night to turn their body cameras off for Reasons I'd like to know.
Yeah, my camera. My camera's on too. Yeah, turn them off. Turn them off. Yeah, my camera's on too.
Turn them off.
For some reason that you might have already noticed, LVPD officers were under the impression that SWAT took down the shooter that night, with CNN even going as far as to claim that Paddock tried to fight his way through officers and even shot one of them before they were forced to kill him. Because journalism.
It was initially reported that perhaps he had taken his own life at the very moment the SWAT team was making entry into his room on the 32nd floor. Now they've clarified that point. They say that as the SWAT officers actually broke in the door, the gunman charged them, made it through the door, struggled with the officers, and was able to get off at least one shot, wounding one SWAT officer in the leg.
And they wonder why we call them fake news. So apparently everyone except the K-9 officer leaves their body cameras off, and the LVPD had to be sued to even release that in full.
CNN.
Let's see why. Wait, now the fire alarm goes off, but not when 1,000 rounds were getting shot off in the room? Weird. But okay, let's see if there's anything else weird going on.
Right where that curtain is, right by the door. It's not. Corey, it's not. No, it's not.
Wait, what? The officer is standing right where the broken window should be, and he can't find it? Shouldn't he literally be stepping and crunching down on hundreds of shell casings and broken glass, according to LVPD's crime scene photos? And why are the curtains damaged to hell in the pics, but look perfectly fine in that video? And for the record, this particular can't find the broken window footage was edited out when mainstream media outlets like the Associated Press aired the footage. Why? What's going on here? I can find footage of the very few times shots were fired out of 134, but I'll be damned if I'm able to find footage of muzzle fire coming from 135 anywhere. Metro 5's helicopter was also unable to find the broken window on their first sweep. I've sat through the footage myself, and weirdly enough, I can't find it either. It does magically appear on helicopter cam after 11:56 and instantly blatantly visible by morning, but those moments in between not seeing it and seeing it are censored out of Metro helicopter's footage from that night. Why? To make it even more interesting, a 911 call would come in from a man staying below Paddock, complaining about hearing an explosion going off and hearing glass fall outside his window at 11:32.
Got a question here. So I just checked into Mandalay Bay, and I'm on the 21st floor, and I just heard what sounded like a explosion above me, and then glass coming down around me, or right outside the window.
So, either someone set a charge up to blow out the window at the same time they breached 134, so they could claim they got the shooter and, calm the public, and that's how the curtains get ruined and glass gets everywhere. Or the charge from breaching 134 shook a big enough chunk of glass loose, making a hard-to-notice slightly broken window now more visible and obvious, which, for some reason, shooting 1,000 rounds out of didn't shake anything loose off earlier. This is why we, the taxpayers, pay for body cams, so you can use them. Although I do love how body cam footage does pick up officers raiding Paddock's minibar on a hot crime scene.
Want some Pringles? One suspect down at Trop, it sounds like.
I understand officers have hard jobs, and I'm back the blue and all. But are you fucking kidding me right now? And what suspect is down at the Tropicana, by the way? What a complete shit show of an investigation. Anyway, the two officers looking for the broken window they can't happen to find are Brett Brosnahan and Corey Mickelson, who aren't even listed in the final report as being there, which makes me feel real good about Metro's record-keeping skills. But at least now we know how hard drives can walk off a crime scene, and evidence as important as the door locks get tampered with.
The status of that door that was locked in the suite is pretty important, right? Because the reason we're not looking for anyone else is because the door was locked from the inside. Okay, right? This is the fulcrum of the entire case. Everything else either opens up to that or closes that. Of course, Lombardo closed it. But this is the blunder. In their final report, the status of the deadbolt was extended, which means the door was breached while the door was locked, so therefore the deadbolt's sticking out.
Makes sense.
In that first preliminary report, same photograph of the door and the lock, the deadbolt is in. Was it locked? Was it open?
There's a huge issue here whether Paddock's deadbolt was locked from the inside or not, since LVPD managed to post pictures of it unlocked in the preliminary and locked in the final report. Considering Lombardo's entire "we don't have to investigate anything further" case of Paddock being the lone shooter rested solely on him barricading himself inside his room, this was a very important and suspicious detail to screw up. Now's probably a good time to mention that many LVPD officers working that night were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements, barring them from ever talking about what happened. Why? Does that sound like Lombardo is running an honest, transparent investigation with nothing to hide? As much as it seems that I'm bashing LVPD's handling of the case, it's really Sheriff Lombardo who is to blame here, as he handicapped his men from telling the truth and solving the crime from the get-go. Your job, Sheriff Lombardo, is to serve and protect the people of Vegas, not cover it for the FBI, who clearly screwed up here somewhere or orchestrated it all together, as it's been discovered they like to do.
It is remarkable what we still don't know about what actually took place that day. Until this Monday night, for example, when it was reported by Revolver News, we had no idea that at least 20 organizers and participants in the events at the Capitol have not been indicted, despite the nationwide dragnet for people who were there. This is interesting. The government knows exactly who these people are, but has refused to charge them with crimes. Why is that? Well, because it seems like they may have had some connection to the government. Some of the people who broke into the Capitol, committed crimes while inside, and encouraged others to do the same appear to have been in contact with the FBI before the event. Let that sink in for a moment. The events of January 6th that you keep hearing about endlessly, events that Democrats in Congress describe as an act of war carried out by white supremacists, as
this is very important,
dangerous and historically significant as Pearl Harbor and 9/11. Those events apparently were at least in part organized and carried out in secret by people connected to federal law enforcement.
Also going on at 11:20 as Paddock is being found dead, a woman calls 911 after hearing a single gunshot inside the Miracle Mile shop at Planet Hollywood. She claims others there heard multiple. Other witnesses also start calling in about hearing shots there, two of which specifically mention that they heard them at Blondie's bar. At 11:21, a weird call comes in from a very unemotional woman claiming there were gunmen holding people hostage at Brixie near T-Mobile and 20 people were shot there. Whether it's fake or not, did anyone look into it? Because calling in a fake report to 911 is not only a crime within itself, but some of these more bizarre and random claims might be done as distractions to spread Metro thin that night.
This is a cover-up like the Bridgeport, Stamford, Norwalk police cover-up of the Greenwich Global heist in Connecticut. I mean, it impacts 5 towns.
And later discredit all the corroborated witness claims that would come in. It's in between 11:23 and 11:56 that Metro 5's helicopter footage is redacted and edited out. At 11:23, calls about the shots heard at Bellagio continue to pour in from people who had to run to safety. One call was even from a Bellagio employee who was working at her station near the front entrance when it happened. At 11:26, a man calls 911 with his son on the line to say there are still scattered shots going off at the Tropicana. Remember, EMTs also complained about getting shots fired at them there, so it can't just be chalked up to civilians being scared. Also at 11:26, a man calls from inside the chandelier room in the Cosmo, claiming to have heard gunshots go off there, which was quickly followed by other corroborated witness calls. The Cosmo is next to the Bellagio, and in a later call from security where they deny hearing shots in their own premise, they would deflect and blame the Cosmo as to where people had heard them. But you admit you heard them, right? 11:26 is also when SWAT officers blast their way to the adjoining side room 134, and one of the cops almost shoots somebody. that would be the accidental discharge made by poor trigger finger safety McGee here, as he let off not one, not two, but 3 accidental rounds in succession. Also, how is Lombardo's narrative that Paddock was running back and forth between the rooms work when obviously someone had locked the door to 134 from the other side? They just had to blow it to hell to get it open. So how did Paddock lock it and then magically transport himself over to 135 to die on the floor? Let's look at the only other available camera angle.
Region 5. Shots fired in trouble. Yeah, we still have this closed door right here. Alright. Mach, are you staying? I'm staying. Alright.
Wait, what room did they just breach? Because it sure doesn't match what 134 looks like in their evidence photos. This one's got a shopping bag and TV remotes on the bed. No guns. This is not this. This is not this. Did they just take on a mass shooter without clearing the adjacent rooms of innocent civilians before barging in and shooting accidental holes in the wall? Considering one of the deceitful excuses Lombardo gives as to why officers loiter around for over an hour before going in is that they were clearing rooms nearby when, obviously, that's not true. The other excuse Lombardo gives as to why the breach took so long was that he was waiting for SWAT. I don't know if you noticed here, but this is not a SWAT team. It's 1 SWAT officer, 2 K-9 units, and a bunch of regular patrol officers. And good on them for going in. But where's the rest of the 40-plus man SWAT team and all their gear? What were they doing that night? They're not anywhere. At 11:29, an officer pulls one possible suspect out of a trash can. Okay, why was the guy in a trash can? Was he hiding from shots? Did he see something? At 11:30, a CVS employee near Bellagio reports hearing multiple shots and people running. At the same time, a woman calls to say her and her wife are hiding from gunshots at the Bellagio. She claims she heard about 4 to 5, which corroborates with all the other witness statements from that incident. Then a man calls 911 to say he heard a single gunshot and saw people running at Excalibur now, followed by the first of many calls from people hearing gunshots and running from a shooter on the Paris casino floor, which is corroborated over the scanner by a female officer at the scene.
That's where it's going.
Is available to 413 at Paris.
Paris! 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 444 Paris! Paris, Paris, Paris. Oh.
This channel is South Central that we do have 1 suspect down in custody for SWAT.
At 11:31, an officer takes 3 suspects into custody, including 2 women with possible weapons. Okay, what happened with that? 11:32 is when that guy calls about hearing broken glass come down outside his window, and where a woman staying on Paddock's floor calls in worried about a fire because there's smoke coming in from underneath her door. A minute later, another woman staying on the 33rd floor would call about an explosion occurring below her. It's strange only because why would they notice and complain about the second breach but not the first? At 11:33, another corroborating call comes in about hearing gunshots going off at the Paris casino. At 11:35, the officers in Paddock's room wonder out loud where all these other reports of shots are coming from. Oh, he looks like he's been dead a while, you say? And you're wondering what all these other shots are that people are calling in about? Me too. It's also at 11:35 that Metro hovers over the Tropicana a little bit and then flies away up north? What? What could possibly be more pressing than what's going on in Vegas right now?
11:31, 11:32. He's going to spend a minute or 2 there, and then he's going to head north to the North Las Vegas Summerlin area, presumably on another assignment, although I don't know what other assignment could be possible on a night like this. So there he is again, popped up like right before 11:35, so he spent about 2 minutes there, presumably offloading personnel. I don't know why else he would land, but he makes a brief stop over Tropicana and then heads north. I zoomed out here so you can see he heads north. He ends up over near the Summerlin area of Las Vegas.
It's also at 11:35 that someone sees a man with a gun go into the bathroom at Luxor.
Number 18 at security talking to me right now. They stated that a person saw a male with a 413 inside the Luxor male's restroom.
At 11:36, a report comes in about 5 suspects with machine guns, all in black, close to the Stratosphere at the Girl Collection. 2 minutes later, over the Enterprise police scanner, dispatch would put out an officer warning about 5 snipers on the east side of the venue, and a team headed there with rifles. I have no idea if they're talking about the same 5 individuals, because that's literally all that exists publicly about it. So what the hell was that about? And don't tell me a strip club doesn't have cameras in their parking lot. At 11:37, a German tourist hiding in the laundry room calls 911 to report the shootout at Bellagio. Also at 11:37, a man calls 911 who's huddled with about 100 other people in a break room at Planet Hollywood to report hearing gunshots there. When people know someone else right next to them is calling 911, they generally don't also call to say the same thing. So just imagine how many witnesses beyond all these calls there really are. At 11:40, Metro had a man call 911 to report a deceased woman in the parking lot near the Catholic Church. As I've mentioned, there were several fatalities that occurred outside of the venue that the LVPD never released bullet forensics for, and which prevents us from knowing if these victims were hit from any of the crossfire shots that people heard coming from the east side near Gate 7 or northeast at Tropicana. Either they have the forensic reports and need to be forced to release them, or everyone involved from top to bottom needs to be fired and replaced for not doing their job. It's also at this time a call comes in about a man with a rifle that everyone keeps seeing get out of a white pickup truck at Bellagio. Thanks to active listeners to the police scanner that night, the gunman's license plate was transcribed and recorded as 444XLM. So law enforcement at the least knows whose truck this is. So where's the report for that investigation? Doesn't the public deserve to know who that man is? A minute later, a woman calls about people running into Harris, saying there's a shooting outside there. People call not only about hearing gunshots, but seeing the shooter. At 11:43, it's discussed that the officers who breached Paddock's room leave to assist with all the other calls coming in on the strip. After K-9 Officer Bitsko turns his body cam off, it's the last time we ever see inside Paddock's room for the rest of the night. It's also at 11:43, a man calls saying he heard multiple shots in the distance from his room in one of MGM Grand's towers. At the exact same time, a couple calls 911 about hearing shots fired at Caesars, and a man sheltering outside of the Mirage with people calls 911 to report gunshots there. The Mirage is right next to Caesars. At 11:47 is when Flamingo Security calls 911 about hearing shots fired in their back parking lot and someone returning a gun to officers near Valet. If you're keeping track, that's now 2 guns found on the street turned in by civilians.
3820, and also just so you know, when we had to have reported shots fired, we did have a guest who brought a gun to officers out near Valet. So it was a gun found also near the Valet entrance.
Near the Valet entrance, excellent.
Either they should trace back to someone and garner an explanation, or these didn't trace back to anyone on purpose because they were meant to cause distractions and be thrown away. It's also at this time that a man calls 911 about hearing shots and having to hit the deck 30 to 40 minutes ago at Bellagio. The 911 operator confirms to the man that there have been multiple reports of shootings in that area. Why does Sheriff Lombardo want everyone to think this entire town just imagined all this?
There. You can see all the cops right here.
That's amazing.
Earlier, there's people running down the street. Everyone was just
Lombardo is a
running
criminal,
there.
man.
And they said something about shooting at Bellagio, but I haven't heard anything on the news yet.
He should be charged.
All the cops were over there. So all these people running down the street and running across this bridge with their hands up in the air. There's a SWAT team going across the road, got some pictures in the camera, and then all these people are just running down the street. It seems to have calmed down a lot right here. Now everyone's back down to that end because I think that's where they took the shooter down. And something is going on right there too. That's the Bellagio. I hope they shot those fucking assholes.
At 11:58, Metro finally tweets out almost 2 hours after the first shots were fired that one suspect is down, but not to go to the strip. Thanks. It's also at this time officers find Mary Lou Danley's credit card in the room. Wait, she left the country without her credit card? That's a little bit more than just letting someone use your comps, but okay. It's also at 11:58 that it gets very interesting. Over an hour and a half after shooting ceased at the festival, 2 separate volleys of automatic gunfire are not only heard by everyone in the Bellagio area, it's also picked up by at least 9 different police comms.
2 hours later. 11:58.
Units were getting at 415A now, Bellagio. PDR is hearing a lot of shots being fired.
2 hours, Bellagio.
When they breached, they said one SWAT shot him.
It's a huge cover-up.
That's a shot. That's a shot.
What was that? Oh, right here! Go! Oh shit, that's a machine gun.
2 hours after. Should we continue? I think we should capture this since they're probably going to take it down.
Oh shit, that's a machine gun. That's a machine gun fire.
Units were getting at 415A now, Bellagio. PDR is hearing a lot of shots being fired.
Keep in mind, there are still multiple reports of people seeing a gunman at the Bellagio at this time. I guess now we know why Lombardo fought so hard to keep that body cam footage from being released. At 12:11 in the morning, a woman calls frustrated that her husband has been sheltering at the Mirage because he heard shots fired there earlier, but that the casino's management is denying having any knowledge of a shooting there at all. The 911 operator confirms to the woman that there were indeed reports about shots being fired at the Mirage. Why is hotel security calling in to lie about things after the fact, especially when many of the initial calls were made by their own employees? At 12:12, an officer gets a report of a white male wearing a black t-shirt going into clubs and clearing them out with a gun. All the manpower and surveillance in the city really couldn't track this guy down. At 12:14, reports of a possible suspect on the 4th floor of Mandalay Bay comes in. At 12:20, reports come in of gunshot victims at Reno and Giles. It's been